angel investors to protect your angel investors as you get your larger rounds of funding. So something to talk about is with your legal staff, whoever's advising you, is how to protect my angel investors so that they don't get diluted out as the larger and larger rounds come in. And that's something that it's a hard discussion to have, but it's a very important one because you don't want those are the people that got you off the ground. You certainly don't want to leave them behind.
Right. So let's go into the lean pitch sample. This is the actual pitch that I made based on this premise. You can see it's beautiful.
Very lean.
It's very lean.
It's extremely lean.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of fluff in that presentation. All right, so time check. I got about 10 minutes.
It's been about
5 minutes.
I've got 5 minutes. All right. So let's go to the first one. So first thing, what's my market? I went through and I described it to them because I knew that the investors wouldn't always know. So what's my market? Next slide, I did what are the business drivers? What do my customers care about? They care about this, this, and this. How are those changing with time? Why is this a new problem? Okay. Next one. How am I going to succeed? What are the market challenges? Why aren't my customers succeeding now? Well, they know how to succeed, but they can't scale it. So what we're doing is we're going to scale it. That's the pitch. So let's go to the next guy. Impact by segment. Here are the guys that are not succeeding. Here are the guys who are succeeding. It's worth about $50 million per name on that list to solve this problem. That's how much revenue they have on the table each. So let's go to the next guy. What's my pitch? Well, and what's my solution overview? I actually did 3 slides for this because this isn't, it was important for them to get a little bit of an idea about what I was doing. So Project Aqua Azura, that's the project name. This is what it's going to do. This is what it's going to enable my customers to do, right? You got to hit both of those things. What am I trying to do with my project? What is my customer going to be able to do with it? So next slide. A little bit of an architectural overview. This is what it's going to look like. Keep it fairly high level. These are investors, they're not techies, right? So let's go to the next slide. Deployment options. Okay, I've got it. It does this. How do I deliver it? What's my mechanisms for actually delivering this thing to my customer base? So multiple phases, multiple deployment options. They like to see flexibility. Let's go to the next guy. Competitive assessment. Who's in my space? Who am I going up against? And how am I going to go after each one of these guys? Right? And why are they not going to clone me? So I find a Magic Quadrant is a great way to do that. You show the people that you expect to go up against, and you need to be able to talk to where each of these people are in that picture and why you're going to be able to win against them. Okay? So go to the next slide here. Sales and marketing, again, not really actually that important because they figure it's going to change. But just go through your approach. You need to know in general who your target market is and how you plan to reach them at a high level. The most important part on this slide is what your cost is going to be for your marketing strategy, right? So moving on to the next guy, execution plan. They want to understand a little bit about your structure. They want to understand in general what your philosophy is. And they want to understand what your cost overhead is going to be. A lot of this has to do with cost because at the end of the day, if there's no revenue and all costs, that's what you're on the bill for. That's your risk. So moving on to the next slide, key dates and milestones. What are you trying to do? When are you trying to do it by? What are you going to do if it doesn't work out? Mitigation strategies are good because mitigation strategies means you've thought it through and you're at a lower risk profile. You can react. So here's what we're trying to do. We're looking for paid pilots. We're looking at $1 million in opportunities. During the pilots, this is what we're going to do, and we expect that we're going to be able to get this. And what are the pilots going to get in return? They're going to get discounted licensing. All right? So moving on to the next slide, financial plan. Spreadsheet with numbers. Nobody actually believes it, but you have to do it. You want to show that, in general, not down to the penny, but here's in general what we're looking at. Here's what we expect to achieve. The most important thing out of this is how long it's going to take to reach your go criteria. If your go criteria is we're going to get our profit to X, and then we're going to sell for 6 times profit, they want to know in general how long that's going to take. 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, right? And I think if we go to the next slide, closing thoughts. And this is where you have a frank and open conversation with them. And there's two questions that I think you should always ask at the end. One is, have we answered all your questions? And the other is, what would you recommend that we do different for the next presentation? What would you recommend that we improve? And usually you can get some very good feedback out of that, and that lets you refine your message when you go on to the next guy. Okay? So what I've done is I've taken this presentation template, and I've just created a template presentation that you guys can have. So Sarge has it. It doesn't have, it's separate and distinct from my presentation. It's just empty. But what I do is I go through and I lay out each of those slides, and I put on those slides what key questions you need to answer on that slide. Make sense? So I'm hoping that that'll be a useful tool to you. Okay? At this point, I'd just like to open it up to questions. I know that was a whirlwind tour of the lean canvas and the pitch. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dan, how many pitches did you make before you got some success?
I did 3.
3, okay.
I did 3, and the guy that actually took me up on it was a little bit different. It wasn't a venture capital firm, and it wasn't a traditional equity firm. It was a company that was actually in my space. I took the same presentation to them, though, and gave it to them. Casey had introduced me to these guys. And they said, yeah, you know what? This is a great fit for what we're doing. And instead of giving you money, how about we pull you in and flip it around and think about the end game. If you're going to a venture capital firm, make sure that you understand what's in it for them, because if they don't get it, they're not gonna foot anything for you. Yes, sir.
I noticed that you were using ashes variant of the business model.
I was.
Is that intentional? Did you actually make a decision between Austin Waters and
No. It's the one we had. Casey's correct. At the end of the day, I'm not sure it matters that much. I think the important thing is to have coverage on each of those topics. When you get in front of the investors, it's important for you to have thought things through, and thought it through from their perspective and from the prospect's perspective, not just from your perspective. Yes, sir.
What was actually handed over to them when they bought? What did they get?
That's a good point. So what they actually acquired is they acquired an exclusive IP license to my product, and there was a stock swap involved. Plus, I get a percent of the business.
So it's a licensing agreement.
They have an exclusive licensing agreement. The company actually still exists, but it's a rump company. There's nobody attached to it. Any growth that occurs in that space, I get a piece of, but it gets filtered to the company that owns the assets.
So are there any milestones in the license agreements, or is it just?
Little bit. Not in the license agreement, but the percent of the business that I get shrinks over time. So I got a block of stock. I have a percent ownership in the company that I switch to, but I get a piece of the business that I grow, and it's a bigger percent at first. So the general idea is, while the business is still slow, I get more of it. As we grow and become larger and larger, that percentage declines. I'm incentivized to deliver value quickly, deliver contracts quickly, so that I get as big of a piece as possible. Yes, sir.
Your IP have any legal protection?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Went through and made sure that I had as good of a contract as I could. So legal advice is very important as part of that. I would get them to review and make sure you've got a lawyer on retainer. I didn't do a patent. We are looking at patents now under the Intellimetics name, but I'm covered in my contract with Intellimetics to ensure that the patents are considered a derivative work. So any value from the patents I still get a piece of. And if I break my relationship with Intellimetics, those rights revert back to me after they are no longer leveraging them, and I'm no longer getting a revenue stream from them. Yes, sir?
As a follow-up to that, how did you protect your ideas and things leading up to the pitch, and especially pitching to the competitor? And how do you...
Well, with a competitor, you want to make sure you have a good NDA in place. Now, I got some good advice around the NDAs, non-disclosure agreement. You want to make sure it's bi-directional. When you look at an NDA, you can tell whether it's a good NDA or not by making sure that they are held to the same terms that you are. If it's all one way, you know it's not a very good piece of paper.
But in the end, you can't really trust it.
You can't, you know.
It's a gut, right? If you're a one-man show and you're going to a sizable company and they want to screw you, they probably can.
But it's
But they're not gonna
it has to help them somehow. And at the end of the day, driving you into the ground is not, you know, just taking your ideas and running with it. If you have something of value, then it's going to be a lot faster for them to get to market by bringing you on board. It's not going to be in their best interest to do an end run around you. Now, if you just have an idea and there's nothing behind it, okay, you know, maybe you've got a little bit more risk there. I wouldn't necessarily go to a competitor until you've talked to a venture capitalist and moved it along a little bit further.
The other thing that's important is to understand the competitor you're going after, knowing what spaces they are in, what they aren't in, what vectors they're on. I mean, there's a lot of homework that you have to do there to make sure that it's the type of person you want to go to, right? The type of company you want to go to. In this case, it was a perfect fit.
I think so.
How did you get that initial intro?
That guy.
Oh.
Well, see that's a really tough thing to do because you have to. It's not enough to have a problem and a solution. You have to have a network, and that's the most difficult part out of all of it. You have to have a network, and you have to have a network for two reasons. You got to be able to work that from a sales perspective, and you have to work that network to find the right people to sell your idea to, you know, to invest in you, right? If you don't have that network, that's a huge risk when you break out on your own. Yes, sir.
Did you have a product? Was this product in the market, or was it concept phase?
Well, no, the product. Let me ask you a different follow-up question on that. See if I can get a little bit of clarity. So, the particular product that I had, are you asking if I brought it to market and was selling it prior to being acquired?
Yeah.
Okay. No, actually, I was in the proof of concept phase. So I had created the product. The technology was there. I had a prototype going. When I went to the company in telematics, they did due diligence on the prototype, but they knew it was a prototype, and they knew that they were going to take it to the next level.
But you had shopped it around to the customer base.
I had shopped it around to the customer base, so I had validation from some of the customers prior to going to Intellimetics, so they knew there was some value there.
As a matter of fact, you had validation from some of the customers of Intellimetics, which helped.
That definitely did help. Any other questions?
So how large was the company when you were acquired? Was it primarily you? Or?
It was primarily me.
Okay.
I had some contractors that were doing some work for me too, but that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long from the inception of the idea until exit?
About 3 months. Yeah.
Wow. I'd say you were thinking about it a lot longer than 6 months. Right?
I was definitely, okay, so from a concept inception, absolutely.